It's not clear over the internet. So can we take any guess on what's the human need depicted there? If our participants would like to type in their best guess. Not sure. Let's wait one more minute in case anyone just stepped away from the keyboard for a second. Okay, so the need depicted here is the need for shelter. Yeah. So how do we go about addressing that need? We come up with a design. So we have a design stage. We say we need to build a structure that will cover our need for shelter. So, we make some calculations where the wall will be, how big our shelter will be, will it have a roof, and so on and so forth. We have a manufacturing stage where we actually construct our solution. And then we have the final product, which will be in the form of a building. So this first series of picture actually describes the discipline of civil engineering. Yeah? And similarly, we have this second row of pictures that depicts mechanical engineering. Yeah? So we have a need for transport. Again, we have a design step. We have a manufacturing stage again, and our final product will be some sort of vehicle, for transportation over land, air, or water. So coming back to biochemical engineering, we have the fundamental needs. So unfortunately, as human beings, we get ill, and we need medicine to get better. So again, we have a design stage. Now, here is a key difference between biochemical engineering, also chemical engineering as well, and the other engineering disciplines, in that our design stage needs to take into account that material and its properties are changing throughout the manufacturing process. So we don't have static materials like a brick or a cogwheel or the axle of a car, stuff like that. We actually have we start from our raw substances, and we transform them through our process into different materials and products. So we need to take this into account during our design stage. We also have our manufacturing stage. It's usually at smaller scale compared to some of the other engineering disciplines. And we have our final product, which in the case of pharmaceuticals can be in the form of tablets, pills, vaccines, and so on. So, in this day and age, what are some of the biggest challenges that we have to address as biochemical engineers? And so one of the major challenges we've been facing, unfortunately, over the past 10, 15 years, is that we have found ourselves in a position where we have to respond to epidemics or pandemics that are breaking out around the world. Now, the way in which biochemical engineers help in addressing this challenge is that essentially, when we have a pandemic or when we have an epidemic, what we need to do is we need immediate access to large volumes of specific medicine. Now, to do that, just to give you a typical example, the timeline from when a medicine is first discovered in the lab to the time it's available on the shelf is usually sometime between 7 to 10 years. Yeah. So now, in response to an epidemic, we need to get an established pharmaceutical and ramp up its production within 6 months or within 4 months. The way, or some of the ways biochemical engineers have contributed to addressing these problems is, development of the concept of platform processes, where we have an established process, a validated process that has all the regulatory approvals, and it's just a matter of swapping in the appropriate genes for the product we're trying to manufacture. Another very important technology that has made a breakthrough in the past maybe 10 years, I would say, is single-use technology. So, this is very useful when we want to rapidly expand our manufacturing capacity. So if we have the traditional stainless steel installations for producing biopharmaceuticals, it's not so easy to say, oh, I need, 1,000 tons per year more this year. let's build a new factory, let's install a new stainless steel facility. It's very, very difficult. It's almost impossible to do. So what we have come up is, or rather the discipline of biochemical engineering has come up with, is the concept of single-use technology. So we have pre-sterilized, single-use plastic bags, essentially, that can serve as full-fledged bioreactors. And that's a very easy way to A, make our bioprocesses flexible, and B, expand capacity very, very quickly. Now, another persistent challenge that we're trying to address as biochemical engineers is affordable medicine. So what we want to do is we want to take those 10 years and actually reduce the time as much as possible. Now, the reason for that is twofold. A, we want novel, new, more effective drugs to be available to patients as soon as possible, but also the cost of development over these 10 years essentially gets baked into the price of medicine. And not only that, but actually for every single medicine that makes it successfully on the shelves, there's probably another 9, if not more, potential targets that fail. So all that research and development costs gets baked into the price of the successful medicine. So by reducing the time to market, essentially, we're reducing the price, we're reducing the costs, and medicine should be more affordable to everyone. And just highlighting some key products that we are involved with as biochemical engineers is new vaccines, monoclonal antibodies or protein-based pharmaceutics, and very, very recently cell and gene therapies. Now, on the more environmental side of things, we all are aware of climate change and the need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. And some of the things that biochemical engineers have been working on over the past maybe 20, 25 years is development of the biorefinery concept. So how can we make things like biofuels sustainable, but also economically viable? And not only this, but how can we harness biology to sort of break away from our dependence on fossil fuels for things like plastics and polymers. Another major challenge is how can we make environmentally friendly processes? So, some of the major challenges that we face, our environment faces, is increased CO2 emissions. So can we come up with processes that A, reduce the amount of CO2 we emit in the environment, or B, can we come up with processes that actually capture or remove CO2 from the environment? But also when we have polluted bodies of water, can we harness biology? Can we find particular enzymes or cells that can sort of clean or decontaminate those bodies of water? And that's a process called bioremediation. Here on the slide, you can see sort of a picture of a body of water before and after being treated with a particular type of microorganisms. So some of the key products in this area are biofuels, cosmetics, and bioremediation, as we just said. So what it is we really do now, we've discussed this just a while ago. We said that taking the biopharma industry as an example, it's 10 years roughly between actual discovery in the lab and a product being available on the shelves. So what is it we do as biochemical engineers? Actually, the period that we're most active is during those 10 years. How do we take a molecule or a protein that's been discovered in the lab and make a full-fledged industrial process that complies with regulations, but also is economically sustainable? So just to give you an example, I have a sort of qualitative graph. On the x-axis, we have scale. And on the y-axis, we have the various processes that we have to go through. So usually when discovering something in the lab, this will be done on a very small scale, usually a Petri dish. Yeah? So how do we move from a Petri dish, which is probably a couple of milliliters worth of volume, to satisfying global demand for a particular pharmaceutic, which could be in the realm of several thousand liters per year? So the first thing we need to do is probably scale up a bit. So we move to a slightly larger scale, probably using shake flasks or tea flasks or small scale bioreactors, usually between half a liter and 3, maybe 5 liters, and then we try to design the actual industrial scale bioreactors, which can be as big as 10,000 liters or more. So we as biochemical engineers need to understand how the environment that the cells experience in these different scales and culture conditions affect the cells and the product they produce. And we need to make sure that the design we propose maximizes the amount of pharmaceutical substance we can extract from the cell, but also that the product is being produced with a consistent quality and complies to regulations. So another example is, so usually let's say we have some cells that produce a protein of interest in the lab, again on the Petri dish scale, and we want to separate we want to separate the product from the cell. So what we would do, we would place them in a small plastic tube, an Eppendorf tube if you're familiar, put them in a benchtop centrifuge, spin them down, throw away the cells, keep the supernatant, and that's it. That's where our product is. Now, that's all fine and easy when we're talking about a Petri dish or a couple of milliliters worth of volume. What happens when we have 10,000 liters of material to process? Yeah. So we have to go and design a large-scale centrifuge like the one shown on the bottom right picture that can handle those volumes without disrupting product quality and product integrity. And similarly, we can think about all sorts of processes and unit operations or steps we have to take in producing the product of interest. So essentially, that is the core of biochemical engineering. How do we take a simple process identified in a lab, in a lab setting, and make a full-fledged industrial process out of it? So the questions we need to answer as biochemical engineers is, how will I make it? How much can I realistically make? How can I make sure that product safety is guaranteed and that we meet regulatory requirements? How much will it cost? And is the process that I'm designing commercially sustainable? Because you might have the best drug, the most effective drug in the market, but if you can't produce it in a financially sustainable way, eventually your process will go bankrupt. So it's really a multidisciplinary subject, as you might have gathered, and it definitely involves biology and chemistry, but there's a lot of engineering, and with that comes mathematics and physics. There's biochemistry, really lots of subjects that kind of blend in to form what is biochemical engineering. So let me see, because I think okay. So let me, for those of you that are not from UCL, let me go over a few facts about UCL London and studying. What's it like to study in UCL? So UCL, this is a map of central London. The orange box depicted there is where the central campus of UCL is. Actually, we kind of spread out a couple of blocks around that orange border, but I'd say the heart of the campus is there. So if I plot, if I place various landmarks that London is famous for around our campus, you'll see that we're quite in the center of it all. So I'll just highlight some. If we have any Harry Potter fans, this is platform 9 3/4 over at King's Cross, probably 10-minute walk away. We have Madame Tussauds over here, again, another 10-15-minute walk probably. British Museum, Piccadilly Circus, the Big Ben down here, Harrods, the famous store down here on the left, and here we have in this bottom corner, we have the sort of financial district with all the skyscrapers and cool buildings, London Bridge, and up here on the corner we have the more kind of trendy hipster area where all the bars are and young students like to hang out. Well, we hang out as well. Anyway, so UCL's history. UCL was founded in 1826. It was the first university to admit students regardless of class, race, or religion. It was the first student to admit female students on equal terms with men. And these are sort of founding principles that sort of resonate and are very, very true today. So UCL is all about inclusivity and, and acceptance and welcoming. So 29 alumni or professors at UCL have been awarded with a Nobel Prize. And if you notice this building here on this top picture, this is actually, I'm not quite sure how old this picture is, but I know that it is from the early years of this century, or actually the previous century, I should have said. And this is how our building, the same building, looks today. So UCL today is one of the top 10 universities worldwide. It has academic departments spanning all disciplines you can imagine, from arts and law to sciences, medicine, engineering, really anything you can imagine. We have around 36,000 students, including around 19,000 undergrads, and our ratio between men and women is quite fairly split. Our students come from 150 different countries, so you know our motto, which is London's Global University, is quite true from these statistics. So one of the main benefits of joining a big university like UCL is that you get access to a lot of student facilities that you can use. So we have a very well-equipped library. We have, for postgraduate students, only two new hubs. One is generally for postgraduate students, and it's just being built right next to me. And we have another another postgraduate hub only for engineering students. So what postgraduate hubs are, they are either entire buildings or a collection of rooms that are available for students to book for studying, for group work, or even for social events. We have several computer cluster rooms. We have a language center that can help you work on your English, or if you want to learn a different language. We have a full-fledged museum actually on campus that you're allowed to visit. Our archaeology department is actually quite well known. And we have student-led clubs and societies about pretty much anything you can imagine. So this can include sports, theater, politics, ethnic-related groups, anything really you can imagine. And obviously we have a full-fledged theater right next to the department actually. And on top of the theater sits our fitness center. Now, a couple of sort of specialized groups at UCL can help you with several aspects of life and postgraduate life in London. And one of the most important ones is the Careers at UCL service. The links are shown in the orange ribbon on the bottom of the slide. So Careers can help you with preparing your CV through one-to-one appointments, doing test interviews for you, so preparing you for when you actually go for that one super interview for the job of your dreams, or so on. And they organize career fairs throughout the year. So career fairs can be either sector specific, so particular one sector at a time, or they can be general career events with a bunch of companies and potential employers come, have their own stand, have an informal kind of chat of what kind of applicants they're expecting, what they expect to see in their applications, what type of positions they have open, and so on. Now, for new students as well, we have our accommodation services, which can help you with finding a place either in one of the halls of residence available at UCL, or even through private accommodation. And it's really helpful, particularly for people that are joining outside of London. Just to give you an idea of the types of halls of residence that are available, there's really quite a wide variety of halls of residence available. These can include self-catered room or catered rooms, with a roommate, without a roommate, any sort of combination exists. The closest one is probably a 5-minute walk from campus. The furthest one away is roughly a 20-25-minute walk from campus, I would say. For new students in particular, what's really, really good, to be honest, I found myself using this service a bit when I first joined UCL, is the new students portal. And there you have sort of day-to-day information you would need about your day-to-day life. So simple things about how do I open a bank account in the UK? How can I use public transport? How can I sort out my visa? And really your survival in London tips that you would need during your first couple of weeks in London. We also have a physical student center so that's a walk-in center that supports students and promotes well-being. So, if you have issues, you're feeling nervous about an exam or stuff like that, you can go and have an appointment with one of our colleagues who are very, very helpful, very, very enthusiastic about what they do. Finally, we have the UCL Union. So that's the student union. It's completely self-organized and run by the unions. You'll notice from the URL on the bottom right that it doesn't have a UCL. It's not hosted within UCL. They have their own independent website, and they're responsible for all the clubs and societies and events that happen around the year. They also run all the cafeterias on campus, completely student-led. So it's a nice, cool way to interact with the union. Okay, so now on to the Department of Biochemical Engineering. We're a small and friendly department. This is all of us, managed to fit everyone on a single slide. So we were the first academic department in the UK to dedicate itself solely to biochemical engineering. So we were actually the founding department for the discipline of biochemical engineering as a standalone taught subject. We're very well known for our research, and 90% of our staff have been rated as either world leading or internationally excellent in the latest research excellence framework that's conducted by the government. We count, I think, currently 20 members of staff, with another 2 new members of staff being recruited, plus 2 visiting academics. We have roughly 140 doctoral and postdoctoral researchers. But we're also very good at teaching. We've been recognized with the Queen's Anniversary Prize for Higher Education for our innovative approach to teaching and how we translate research into teaching into industrial practice. And we're also quite good at enterprise, so we span the entire spectrum of academic activity with 3 spin-out companies, one of which was bought out by GSK, I believe, 2 or 3 months ago. So this is a recurring theme. We work very, very closely with industry, both on our research and on our training activities. And these are just some of the companies we interact very, very frequently with. So for those of you that have an interest in the biopharma sector, you'll notice all of the big names being depicted there. And we'll discuss in a second, what are the various mechanisms through which you can interact with these companies during your studies here. So our research, just to give you an idea of the type of topics we cover in terms of research, is focused around 3 main classes of molecules. So we have our small molecules, that includes complex chemicals and pharmaceuticals. This can range either from things like bioplastics, biopolymers, novel biomaterials, or even pharmaceuticals. We have our core pharmaceutical stream of research, which includes monoclonal antibodies, proteins in general, viruses and recombinant vaccines. And we have our cell and gene therapy research stream, which does CAR-T therapies and stem cell-based research. And the way we integrate all of these together is we look at what we call whole bioprocess research. So while doing research, we don't focus on a particular aspect, but rather we try to look at the big picture all the way from discovery to commercialization. And just to give you an idea of how that sort of might affect you as an MSc student, this is a selection of MSc research projects that have been given out in the past 3 years. So if you go through the titles, you'll see that they span the entire spectrum. We have microfluidics-based projects, we have stem cell-based projects, we have genome editing-based projects, so really quite broad variety of projects. And just to give you a visual example of some of the research we do, so this is from the microfluidics lab. On the left pane here, you will see, what you see is stem cells, embryonic stem cells actually growing on a microfluidic chip. And obviously, when working with stem cells, one of the key challenges is actually quantifying and measuring them. So you can have a sense of, if you're changing your process parameters, how does that affect the number of cells and the quality of the cells you're getting? So what the people in the microfluidics lab have done, they have developed their own image recognition software, shown here on the right, that allows to use a high resolution camera to take snapshots of the culture and translate that into cell numbers. So every pixel that's white on the right here is essentially recognized as a cell that's growing. Just to give you another example, this is very, very recent research from our chromatography lab, so from our separations lab. And what they've done is they've developed novel cellulose-based nanofibers, so nanomaterials that are able to capture adenovirus. So adenovirus is a very promising new potential pharmaceutic. And here, based on that knowledge and based on that material, they're trying to develop new chromatography, new separation techniques to increase the efficiency with which we can separate this new potential pharmaceutic. Okay, so now on to the MSc Biochemical Engineering. We have 3 streams. Depending on your undergraduate degree, you're allocated into one of these 3 streams. So we have the engineering stream, which is suitable for graduate generally in the life sciences. So we're talking biology, molecular biology, chemistry, biochemistry, those type of areas. The focus there is on translating, introducing. So you have the life science background. What we want to do is we want to train you as engineers. So the focus is very much on the core engineering fundamentals. And this all culminates in the design project you do at the end of, during term 3. We then have the science stream. That's generally suitable for engineers, process engineers, chemical engineers, or engineers from other disciplines. They have the fundamentals in engineering through their undergraduate degree. So we introduce the biology and how that biology kind of affects and has an impact on the engineering and the design process. And finally, we have the biochemical engineering stream, which is suitable for candidates for candidates with an undergraduate degree in biotechnology, bioprocessing, or biochemical engineering. So the entry requirements are a second-class UK degree or international equivalent, proof of English language proficiency, and this is just some examples, IELTS and TOEFL, I guess the most frequent ones. There is a variety of English language degrees that UCL recognizes, and you can find more information if you just Google English language requirements at UCL. We need transcripts of your grades, of your undergraduate degrees and MSc degrees if you already have one, translated in English, a personal statement explaining why you want to study biochemical engineering, and 2 references from people who are able to comment on your performance during your degrees. Key date for the 2018-2019 intake is the deadline for applications is the 27th of July. Yeah? So our application cycle is already open. You're free to apply. I actually encourage you to apply early, but your sort of final deadline is the 27th of July. Now, for students coming from overseas that would require a visa, I recommend to apply as early as possible because one of the requirements for your visa is that you hold a conditional offer from a UK university. So you'll want to secure that as early as possible. So I'll go through the various streams briefly. So the engineering stream, the program director is Dr. Frank Pagans. It has a list of compulsory modules covering bioprocess synthesis and process mapping, bioreactor engineering, so bioreactor design, downstream separations, commercialization and bioprocess research, fluid flow and mixing, heat and mass transfer, validation and quality control, and finally the design project. And so all of these are compulsory modules. So you'll notice that general theme, as I said, is very much on training you on these fundamental engineering principles. What are the various pieces of equipment that you would come across in an actual bioprocess? How do we design them? How do we operate them? Those kind of things. And that all culminates, as we said, in the design project you will do during the summer months. So what this design project is, we give you sort of a brief or a specification where we say we want you to produce X quantity per year of this particular pharmaceutic using this type of cells, and you have to go on and figure out what size of reactors you need to use, how big these have to be, what are the various separation steps in order to extract your product, and sort of do all the detailed calculations behind that. Finally, the engineering stream has one option. They can choose either between cell therapy, and biology and clinical translation, or bioprocesses and biorefineries. So the first one is very much a stem cell regenerative medicine kind of module, and the second one is more about biofuels and biorefineries. Moving on to the science stream, we have some common modules shared between the two streams. Actually, we have modules shared between all three streams. We have, again, reactor engineering and downstream separations. We have sustainable bioprocesses and biorefineries. We also have fundamental biosciences. So this is your biology 101 type of module. And we have a research project. So the science and biochemical engineering streams do not do a design project. Instead, they do a research-based project during the summer months. And then there are some elective modules. So you can choose any one module out of this list on the top here, and another one from these two down here. Okay, so this allows you to look into some different areas like microfluidics or vaccines. Finally, the biochemical engineering stream, again, has a series of compulsory modules. So we have biorefineries, systems engineering, cell therapy, and synthetic biology, validation and quality control, and again, a research project. And then for the biochemical engineers, there's a bit more flexibility that they can select 3 modules out of this list down here. So through this MSc, throughout the year that you will be with us, and it is a full calendar year, September to September, there are some unique opportunities. So you will be able to participate in the MBI program, or the Modular Training for the Bioprocess Industries program. So what this is a series of accredited short courses, workshop type courses between 3 and 4 days in duration, that have been designed for industrial delegates. So essentially, the various companies we collaborate with have identified the need for either retraining of their staff or training of their staff on new technologies. And we have designed a series of courses to help address that need. And you will be able to sort of follow along and participate in some of these modules. Now, as I said, these modules have been designed, but are also delivered in collaboration with industry. So, during an MBI module, you can be in a classroom. The person next to you might be a person from industry. You'll get several opportunities during the lunch breaks and the coffee breaks to sort of interact in an informal level, find out more about their daily jobs, and how to better tailor your application potentially for that particular company. You'll also get to do a lot of hands-on work during the practicals in our labs, and really our focus is more on modern bioprocessing techniques that you would actually use if you went to work on an industry, and not things that have been discovered like 30 or 40 years ago. And that really kind of brings the connection between the kind of theory you will be covering in the taught modules, and it all melds together. Finally, a very interesting opportunity, if you're in, if you find that interesting, is the iGEM competition. So for those of you that are not familiar, iGEM is an international competition between universities. Each university has its own team. It's completely student-led, and every year there is an objective that the students need to find a solution to by genetically modifying a particular organism using pre-specified components. The UCL team is led by our department and has a pretty good track record of winning gold. And just some key numbers and figures. So the vast majority of our graduates, I'd say probably a good 50 to 60% end up in the biopharma industry, either in research and development or a manufacturing role. A smaller number end up in biochemical engineering related consultancy firms. Obviously, being in London and having a big financial district, we do have a number of our graduates ending up in the financial sector, and roughly 25% of them go on to do a research degree. And that gives you an idea of how research intensive and new and kind of at the cutting edge of science our discipline is. The average graduate starting salary is roughly £28,000 per year. So with this, I'll finish the presentation, also the part where I just talk, and we'll open up the floor for questions. And I have with me today Ben, will just join me down here, who is an MSc student last year. So he's a graduate from last year, and you stayed on
to do NGD.
An NGD. Okay, so can you tell us a few words while Ben is talking? Please type in any questions you might have, and we'll either for me or for Ben, and we'll answer them as we go along. So, can you tell us about what you're doing now, and then take us through your journey of how you ended up where you are?
Okay, so my undergraduate was in biochemistry, so it was very much science-based. I decided that I wanted to learn about engineering, so I thought that biochemical engineering would be a good bridge for that. And then I found the MSc was, it was very rewarding. I learned a lot of engineering principles. So then I decided to do a doctorate project where I could use my biochemistry experience as well as the engineering principles that I just learned. So now I'm doing an engineering doctorate. I'm sponsored by a company called Reneuron. So they're a stem cell based company. And so we're doing research into exosomes. So exosomes are like vesicles that are released by cells. So in this case, it's stem cells. So my project is around purifying them so that we can make some products in the end.
Okay, excellent. So let's see, I think we have a question. So is it suitable for graduate in food science and technology? Okay, so my recommendation, there's no easy answer to this. My recommendation is you have my email on the slide. Send me via email a list of your transcripts in English. If you're currently in your final year, send me a list of modules you're taking this year, and I'll be able to provide an answer for you. We have had in the past students that had a similar background, but obviously degree from degree, university to university, country from country, there's very big variability. So what I do is we go through the transcripts in detail and try to figure out if sort of the key requirements are met. Bishoy, just please send me your transcripts and a list of modules you're currently taking, and I'll be able to provide you with an answer. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Actually, while waiting, perhaps I could ask a question because it comes up quite often from MSc students. What's it like working with the pilot plant and facilities here?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the pilot plant here is amazing. So in the basement of this building, there's quite a large pilot plant, and there's a lot of cool equipment, like a pilot scale, which is pretty big. So there's a lot of fermenters, centrifuges, and you'll spend a lot of time there, depending on which stream you're on. I was on the engineering stream, so I did, a lot of practicals in there. So I got to use the equipment. So that was really cool.
So a pilot plant, I guess, for those not familiar, is a full-fledged facility, very similar to what you would see in industry in an actual working process, just at a smaller scale. So let's say, for example, in industry, you would have a reactor being 4,000 liters. Down in the pilot plant, we have a 150-liter reactor. And the same is true for all equipment. So you get this appreciation of how an actual facility would look like at a smaller, workable scale.
there's a question from Patrick. This is thankfully a presentation, and would like to know how you actually found the transition from biochemistry to engineering.
Okay, so I thought it would be really tough, but it wasn't so bad. So you'll be part of the engineering stream, so you'll learn the very basic principles, and you'll learn this partly from lectures, partly from the MBI modules, and then partly from practicals. And there's also a recommended textbook. It's called Duran, and that takes you through all the basics. So you've always got something to look back on. And yeah, it's not too hard really. You know, I wasn't an expert in engineering. I didn't know anything about it, but now I'm doing an engineering doctorate. So you know, the course works.
Okay, and you know, how did you find the transition throughout the year? So obviously, term one might have been a bit scary.
Oh yeah, okay. So the MSc felt like the third year of my undergraduate, basically. So, I mean, you get going straight away. I would say within a month, you feel normal. You know, you feel like you're in your third year. You go into classes, some of them are practicals, and yeah, it's. I think there's quite a lot to keep up with, but you know, it's not impossible. It's like your third year basically, so you should think of it like that.
And how, you know, what was the role of the design project in all of this?
Yeah, the design project. So so this was how I spent my summer. You're put into groups of 4, and you're basically given a task. So for us, we had to produce a vaccine, and basically you go away and they divide it into sections. So you have your literature review, and then you do like a mass balance. You want to know how much you got to produce, and you basically just keep working on this project, and you'll have regular meetings with academic staff who are experts, so you can kind of talk to them about it. And there's also an MBI module. So the way that it started was there's 2 MBI modules on the design project. So you'll work with industrialists, and you'll develop the key ideas then. So you have something to build upon in the summer when you actually go off into your groups and start working on it. And then at the end of it, you basically end up with a huge folder full of work. And yeah, I thought it was great because you actually get to see right from the beginning to the end. So the science behind the vaccine all the way to producing it, commercializing it. So if you're interested in that, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, so would you say it helps kind of, you know, you've done your 8 modules throughout the year. Does the design kind of help put all the pieces in place?
Yeah.
How it makes sense in a way.
Yeah. So if you don't go through those modules, you can't really do the design project. So I found myself looking back to every single module really. All the engineering modules really. They really come into play here. And I think you actually look back on it and think, oh, actually, you know, I learned loads. You know, I've actually been able to produce this whole project. And actually, you don't really realize that when you are doing the modules. But yeah, design projects. That's great.
I'm conscious that we are. Oh, sorry. There's another question that's come up. So, how many students do you work with in this design project?
Okay, so in my cohort, there was around 16 of us, I think. So then we were split into groups of 4. So there are 4 groups of 4, basically.
So usually that is the size. It's around 4. Very rarely, 5 if there is an odd number of students and we can't do an even split. But usually the size is around 4.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to read that question. You mentioned the iGEM project. Can you do iGEM project when you do your summer master's project? Or how do you get involved in iGEM if you have your MSc design project in the summer already?
Yeah, so that's that is a bit of a challenge. I would say the design project is probably a bit more difficult to combine with iGEM. A research project might be a bit easier, but you have to realize iGEM is active throughout the year. It's not just a summer thing. So, you know, if you find some spare time during term, you can get involved at the early stages of iGEM. So I think iGEM, I believe, starts sometime around March, I want to say, and finishes sometime in November. So throughout that period, obviously as an MSc student, you can't be involved throughout the entire year because it just doesn't combine well with your timetable. But it's split in phases, so you can easily tag along in one of those phases, depending on how your timetable looks.
Cool. Just one thing that I'd like to ask Ben and Alex is MBI is a really critical part of the program. Perhaps you'd like to explain what it is and how it works, how it combines with the MSc.
Ben, would you like your take on it?
Yeah, so you basically get a week off. It lasts 3 or 4 days, and it's just a series of lectures, and you're joined by industrialists basically. And then the lectures are presented also by some industrialists and also some lecturers at the department, and they'll basically take you through kind of the cutting edge. So if you want to go into a specific field, they're very useful. You get to learn what is being developed right now, and also if you want to work for a company, it's also a great way to meet people that might help you along the way. So I think for the engineering stream, we did around 7. Yeah, and I thought they were very valuable, and they supplement the courses. So the material is kind of cutting edge, so you're not examined on the cutting edge stuff, but they supplement what you learn in lectures.
Cool. If you had to pick, your favorite thing about either the department or UCL or the MSc, from this past year, not from what you're doing now, but from this past year, what stands out from the experience?
Oh, that's difficult. I would say the practicals. The pilot plant is, I don't know, it's modern. It is amazing, So being able to work with all this big equipment, and it's not just 1 or 2 pieces. Actually, you go throughout the pilot plant, and you learn about lots of different equipment, and you get to use it. So for me, that was the most interesting part, especially as a biochemist. We don't see this huge equipment. We kind of work on bench scale. So yeah, that was really interesting.
Okay, brilliant. Do we have any other questions? Okay, while we're checking for questions, how is life in the department? You've experienced it both as a taught student and now as a research.
Yeah, well, I'm loving my doctoral studies at the moment. It's very different. The MSc is very much going to lectures. It's very structured, but the research is kind of unstructured. You've kind of got to plan it yourself. And for me, that's the most interesting part. I can actually, I can think of an idea and I can just plan it, and then I can go do it. Yeah, so that's really great for me.
And did you get to interact with staff?
Yeah. So you'll get at least 2 supervisors. So you have 2 people that you can always go and talk to. With me, I have a 3rd one, so I have the company supervisor as well. So we kind of talk a lot, but also other people in the department. So for me, I go back to some of the lecturers from my MSc, and I'll ask them questions if it's something that they're specialising in, and then I'll take that back to a meeting with my supervisor, and then we kind of generate these ideas, and and then we just get going with it.
Okay, brilliant. Do we have? That's it. Okay, good. So thank you very much, Ben, for your time. Thank you all for joining. If you have any remaining questions or anything pops up, just feel free to send me an email. It's down on the bottom left of your screens, but it's also on our website. So thank you all for joining.